Welcome back, dear friends. In the earlier lecture, we discussed about the Elizabethan poetry. We opened the topic with the background and introduction about the Elizabethan period, the impact of Renaissance on this Elizabethan age, and the major form of writing along with many other forms, poetry became an important form of writing in this era. And in poetry, we found that sonnet is the major form of poetry written in this age. Now, today in this lecture, we shall talk about the major sonnet writers, the sonneteers. Now you can see in this slide two pictures, two images of very important poetry writers. They are Thomas Wyatt and the Earl of Surrey. The Earl of Surrey is the name that he has earned. His original name is Henry Hayward. The time span is from 1503 to 1542, Henry Wyatt, and from 1517 to 1547, that is of the Earl of Surrey. Now, sonnet, which may be regarded as an invention of the 13th century Italy. As we know that sonnet has been borrowed from a well-known poet, that is Petrarch, we have seen, and the tradition, that is Petrarchan tradition of sonnet writing, that has been borrowed from Italy, that slowly won the favor of the English poets. Now this sonnet form slowly migrated to England in this English literature not before the third decade of the 16th century. So in the third decade of the 16th century, we find sonnet writing in English language. English sonnet was first written in imitation of the Italian by Sir Thomas Wyatt and the Earl of Surrey. Now, these are the two important names who began the tradition of writing sonnet in English language, Sir Thomas Wyatt and the Earl of Surrey. Thomas Wyatt introduced the sonnet to English literature. He followed the Petrarchan form, which was modified by his friend Surrey. Now, they were very good friends. Wyatt first introduced sonnet into English and he followed the Petrarchan form. Now you understand, or now you know the Petrarchan form, the Shakespearean form and the Spencerian form. So he followed the Petrarchan form, and that form was later on modified by his friend the Earl of Surrey. But these primary efforts form an isolated episode in English literary history. They gave birth to no vogue. VOGUE. Vogue means fashion. It has not become a tradition till then. But these primary efforts, the efforts made by Wyatt and Surrey, they were primary efforts to form an isolated episode. They formed an isolated episode, means they produced sonnet form in a very limited number. and they did not make a very great contribution in the English literary history, and that is why it was not a fashion of writing sonnet uh, up to their time. During this period, more sonnets were written in England than in any other decade. Now, this is the period where we find sonnet writing more than in any other period of the history of English literature. So, the period of Queen Elizabeth is the most fertile period of sonnet writing so far as this English sonnet form is concerned. Now, after Wyatt and Surrey, some three important names that come to us. Now, you can see the pictures of three very great personalities, very dignified personalities. Looking at their pictures also, they are Sir Philip Sidney, Edmund Spencer, and William Shakespeare. This great trio of Elizabethan poets attached a great value to the genre of English sonnet. The tradition has been started by Wyatt and Surrey. It has been followed by this trio. Trio means Trinity. Three poets, Philip Sidney, Edmund Spencer, and William Shakespeare. This is a trio. Trio means in Gujarati we have a word tripoti. So, Sidney, Spencer, and Shakespeare, all names beginning with S, they attached a great value to the genre of English sonnet. The glory of the English sonnet is a blaze. Blaze means fire in the hands of these three writers. English sonnet flourished and developed, progressed a lot in the hands of these writers. So, these are the three important names. They are the stalwarts of sonnet writing so far as any other form of poetry writing of this age is concerned. Sir Philip Sidney, the time span is 1554 to 1586. William Shakespeare, see the personality of Shakespeare, on whose name the entire age is known, the age of Shakespeare. The time span is from 1564 to 1616. You have to remember these dates, these years of their birth and death. Then Edmund Spencer, he lived between 1552 to 1999. Some rare and isolated triumphs of their contemporaries, Samuel Daniel, Michael Drayton, and Henry Constable, also lend to the Elizabethan sonnet aesthetic interest. Now, after Wyatt and Surrey, we have three important names to be remembered as sonnet writers. They are Sidney, Spencer, and Shakespeare. Then some small writers, some isolated and rare attempts they have made by their contemporary writers. They are Samuel Daniel, Michael Drayton, and Henry Constable. These are also important names. There are so many others who have tried their hands in the field of sonnet, but here these are the names we are mentioning here. They are the very important contributors to the field of sonnet writing in this Elizabethan period. So they have contributed and added what we are writing, also lend to the Elizabethan sonnet aesthetic interest that has been given by these three uh, sonnet writers, Samuel Daniel, Michael Drayton and Henry Constable. So these three names you add to your lexicon, to your dictionary to be remembered. Then some formal modifications characterizing the Shakespearean form were first of all introduced by Daniel and Drayton. Now, Daniel and Drayton, they endeavored to make some modifications in the Shakespearean form of sonnet writing. After the great sonnetiers Sidney, Spencer and Shakespeare, it is Michael Drayton who bears reading best. Now, this is also a credit to this writer, this poet, Michael Drayton, who is an important sonnet writer who is best read after Sidney, Spencer and Shakespeare. So it is a credit to him. Now Sidney's Astrophel and Stella, Spencer's Amority and Shakespeare's sonnets, the bold words you can see, they are the titles of the collections written by or published by these writers, these poets. Sidney, he published Astrophel and Stella. The name of his collection is Astrophel and Stella. Sidney's collection, then Spencer's collection is known as Amoreti, and Shakespeare's collection of sonnet is Sonnets. Bear many marks of sincerity and of direct relation to life and their authors. Now these collections, these books compile together so many sonnets in them. They bear many marks of sincerity and of direct relation, means the subjects and themes dealt with in these poems, these sonnets written by these three important poets, they have direct relation to life and their authors. So sonnets, they connect the authors to the life. So the connection between the author, the poetry and life, it is showed very beautifully in these collections. The glory of the English sonnet is a blaze. It's a blaze, it's a fire in the hands of these three writers. It is a blaze in the hands of these three writers, means whenever they are writing, their pen is just like a fire. So this poetry flourished like anything in the hands of these trio. Few of Elizabethan sonnetiers reached high level of poetic performance. Few of Elizabethan sonnetiers reached high level of poetic performance, and these three are among those. The extraordinary outburst of sonnet writing at a certain period of Elizabeth's reign has always attracted the attention of literary historians who keep the record of the literary production. Now, all the historians of English literature, they have to take note of the contribution made by these important sonnet writers in this Elizabethan period. Now let us see these three important sonnet writers one by one. Let us see Sir Philip Sidney first. Sidney's famous collection of sonnets is known as Astrophel and Stella. Now, what is the theme of his writing? The poet, under the name of Astrophel, professes Prefaces means he declares or rather pretends or claims to narrate the course of his passion for a lady whom he gives the name of Stella. Estafel and Stella, these are the nickname names adopted by Sidney himself. For himself is Estafel, and he gave the name to his beloved, the lady to whom he addresses in the poem is Stella. So Estafel and Stella are the names assumed or adopted by them, by the writer, given to them. Bitter regret for lost happiness, the irresistible desire to possess his beloved, despair at the first coldness, the sweetness at feeling himself loved by her even when she fled him, the struggle in his truly virtuous heart between duty and passion, reason and desire. Such is the theme of Estafel and Stella. Now, what is the theme of Estafel and Stella? The collection given by Sidney is based upon what theme? So you can explain this, explain in these terms. Bitter regret. This is a kind of love story between the author and his beloved. The beloved has forsaken the author, means she left living alone the author, but the attachment towards that lady is well treated by the author in his poems. Bitter regret, I would like to read it again for you. Bitter regret for lost happiness. Regret, paschatap, pastavo. Bitter, it is bitter. Bitter means it is not good. It is not tasting happier. It is bitter regret for lost happiness. The irresistible desire to possess his beloved. Irresistible, that cannot be stopped. Unstoppable desire to possess his beloved, to get or gain his beloved. Despair at the first coldness. Coldness means the response that he received from his beloved is not warmth, full of warmth. It is cold response. So the first coldness, the sweetness at feeling himself loved by her, and the sweetness that he felt from his beloved even when she fled means she left him. The struggle in his truly virtuous heart means the heart of the poet is truly virtuous and he is struggling to gain his beloved. Between duty and passion, the reason and desire, among all these, the struggle of the author is very beautifully presented in the poem. Such is the theme of Estafel and Stella. To express feelings which had some analogy with Petrarch's, Sidney had recourse to the sonnet which had been neglected in England since Surrey's days, and in the straitened compass of its 14 lines, he immortalized each movement of his heart and each incident of his love. She is Stella, his star, and he, Estafel, the lover of the star. Now, in this passage, we mean to say that Philip Sidney has expressed his emotions, his love for his beloved in the best possible way in the straitened compass, means the limited canvas of his of 14 lines sonnet. He has tried his best to immortalize each movement of his heart and each incident of his love. So it shows his best capacity of uh, the expression of his feelings in this form of sonnet. She is Stella, his star, and he means Estafel, he himself, the lover of the star. So, this way, Sidney is a successful sonnet writer in the Elizabethan period. Now, let us move to the second sonnetier, that is Edmund Spencer. As a sonnetier, Spencer is known for his amority sonnets. The collection of Spencer's sonnets, the name is Amority Sonnets. Only in them he voices his feelings without dependence to allegory. Allegory means symbolic representation. So he voices his feelings without dependence to allegory, means without any use of allegory. He expresses his feelings into the sonnet form. So the best expression he finds into the sonnet. It was almost the sole medium of personal expression. Sonnet has remained the uh, most successful as well as only medium for the personal expression in this time. It was the publication of Estafel and Stella which prepared the way for the Amority and several other collections. Now, before Spencer, Sidney was there who published his collection of sonnets uh, titled Estafel and Stella, and which became the torchbearer or the path maker for the publication of Amority by Edmund Spencer. So, Edmund Spencer found it beneficial that Sidney was his earlier writer who paved the way for his publication of his sonnet collection titled Amority. In the first rank of works of the English Renaissance, Spencer's sonnets came between those of Sidney and Shakespeare, from which they are distinct in form and sentiment. Now, chronologically, if we try to analyze, Spencer's sonnets come between those of Sidney and Shakespeare. Before Spencer, there is Sidney, and after Spencer, there is Shakespeare. So, Spencer's sonnets are between these two big or mega writers of sonnet, from which they are distinct in form and sentiment. Means Spencer's sonnets are distinct in form and sentiments from the sonnets of Sidney as well as Shakespeare. They do not throb with the restlessness of Sidney's love for Lord Rich's wife, nor of Shakespeare's anguish, whose mistress deceived him with his friend. Now, this is very, very important for us to make this comparison among these three: Sidney, Spencer, and Shakespeare. Spencer is quite different from his other two friends, Sidney and Shakespeare, because Sidney and Shakespeare, both of them have a different kind of experience so far as their love relations are concerned. Spencer did not have any kind of that experience or other bad experience of love as Sidney had, and the same way Shakespeare also had in his lifetime. So we can very easily point out this, that they do not throb, means there is not the existence with the restlessness of Sidney's love for Lord Rich's wife, means the beloved of Sidney, nor of Shakespeare's anguish, whose mistress, means Shakespeare's mistress, deceived him with his friend. So the bad experience of love of both the writers, Sidney and Shakespeare, has not been felt or experienced by Spencer in his lifetime, and that is why that kind of feeling he is not expressing in his sonnets. So, in that connection, we can say that Spencer's sonnets are unique by their purity. They tell a story of love without sense of sin or remorse. Remorse means repentance, paschatap or pastavo. Now, in comparison with Sidney and Shakespeare, Spencer's sonnets are unique by its purity. His sonnets are pure in love. In the expression of love, his sonnets are pure compared to those other two. He tells a story of love without sense of sin. No kind of sin or remorse we find in the sonnets of Spencer. The Amorati sonnets show better than anything else the quality in Spencer which Coleridge excellently named maidenliness, his love of the chastity in woman. Now, when these sonnets exhibit the feelings towards women, a woman is known by the chastity in her. So, the quality of chastity that is to be adorned or praised by the lover. So, Edmund Spencer is lucky enough that the quality of chastity that he finds in his beloved is of a supreme quality, and that is why the sonnets express the pure love, and that is why Coleridge excellently named maidenliness for his love sonnets. It was said that the sonnet was not an ideal form for Spencer to work in. His exuberant, means enthusiastic genius found irritating the restraint of the 14-line limit. Sidney adopted himself more successfully. Compared to Sidney, Spencer did not find himself comfortable in writing his sonnets because his exuberant or enthusiastic genius found it irritating the restraint of the 14-line limit. The 14-line limit of the sonnet form is not liked properly by Spencer, and that was accepted to Philip Sidney. Spencer's sonnets naturally reveal much of their literary ancestry. The Amorati love sonnets fall far below the level of Shakespeare's splendid series. So, the love sonnets of Sidney, Spencer and Shakespeare, when we compare these all, the series presented by Shakespeare, that is of a supreme quality, and it has a splendid series published by William Shakespeare, that we will see in the next lecture. So we shall stop here. Thank you very much for your patient listening.